back to History Class with Dr. W. As we conclude our discussion in this lesson about the creation of the new government and the new nation, we have one more element to that new government to talk about, and that is the Bill of Rights. Throughout the great debate over the Constitution and whether it should be ratified or not, the Anti-Federalists always insisted that a Bill of Rights must be added in the form of amendments to the end of the Constitution. And so the Bill of Rights was indeed added in the aftermath of all of this, and it stands as really the lasting legacy of the Anti-Federalists. It is often held up as one of the great victories of the Anti-Federalists. And when we think about those first 10 amendments and things like the right to bear arms, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and so on, they truly do enshrine some of the cornerstone rights that we cherish as Americans, and they were enacted in large measure because the Anti-Federalists insisted they were so. But how great a victory was this for the Anti-Federalists? They really didn't alter significantly the structure of the government as laid out in the Constitution. While they do set aside some specific rights, they didn't change the nature of the bicameral legislature, the separation of powers, and so on. And in some cases, elements in the Bill of Rights actually strengthen the central government even more than was already laid out in the Constitution itself. So let's talk a little bit about why and how the Bill of Rights were ultimately included. There was discussion of the Bill of Rights even during the Constitutional Convention itself. And so even amongst the Federalists, there was some understanding that a Bill of Rights was likely in the aftermath of the debate and ultimately the adoption of the Constitution. So why was it that it was not included during the Constitutional Convention? Well, clearly, after 4 months of vigorous and difficult debate, they didn't want to throw in wrinkles right at the end of the process that might mean that the Constitution was not enacted or even submitted to the states for ratification. Also, Federalists argued that it wasn't necessary. Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 84 undertook the discussion of whether a Bill of Rights should be enacted or not. And he wrote, "The truth is, after all the declamations we have heard, that the Constitution is itself, in every rational sense and to every purpose, a Bill of Rights." So they believed that the Constitution protected the rights that the Anti-Federalists were concerned about. They also were concerned that a Bill of Rights was risky. What if we outline a series of rights, but we leave something out that needed to be included? What if we include the wrong kinds of rights, and down the road we realize that we've made a mistake? Now, as it turned out, neither of these objections on the part of the Federalists were overwhelming. And so ultimately, of course, the Bill of Rights is going to be added at the end of the Constitution. The Anti-Federalist response to those objections was powerful, spearheaded by Thomas Jefferson. He argued that the Bill of Rights would provide a sort of anchor for the citizens of the country, a source of stability that they could always look to as a kind of security blanket between themselves and the government, that their most basic rights would never be crushed by the government. And I think in this they were correct, weren't they? Again, many of us can recite elements of the Bill of Rights, those first few amendments, the right to free speech, freedom of the press, the right to bear arms, and so on, almost as easily as we can recite the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, these other foundational documents. Jefferson also argues that they could easily include some kind of statement saying that there may be other rights not included or not listed, which was done also in Amendment 9. He also argued that this provided a foundation for judicial consideration, which also was proven to be true over time. Over the course of this debate, many Federalists, including James Madison, began to see that the Bill of Rights might actually be more good than bad. If this is what is necessary to put the minds of the people at ease, and most importantly of all, to get the thing ratified, then let us make this concession. Is it so wrong to include a series of cornerstone rights to reassure the people that they will be protected? And I think at the end of the day, this is where the Anti-Federalists really do win their victory. And in many ways, they were proven right about their suspicions about the new government. They were concerned about a large centralized government that might become oppressive and might impinge at times on the rights of individuals. I think they've been proven correct to have that concern. They were concerned that state and local governments should have a more prominent role and have some ability to check the larger centralized government. And in fact, in many ways, as the centuries have gone by, state and local governments are more and more marginalized, and the federal government has taken a much larger role. They were worried about the decline of civic virtue. If we distance the government so much from the masses and the people that they represent, then we will lose this kind of cornerstone idea that civic virtue is what this country is all about, working to the greater good, as opposed to our individual successes and desires. And again, I think that's a debatable point, but we could certainly argue that in our current country there has been a decline in the idea of civic virtue, the idea of working towards the betterment of the whole, at the expense of kind of individual selfish desires. So, all of these kind of concerns are going to be front and center as the new government is put into effect. We will talk about the emergence of this new government and its first years of action in our next series of lectures.